Yeah.
Crazy.
Can I ask, this is a historian's question, something I've often wondered about, and it's to do with that process of, floating currency, financial deregulation, anti-tariff, end of protectionism, competition policy, privatisation and so on. How far, when you entered the Treasury 83, was the whole process kind of in your mind? How far did it emerge from one crisis to the next? And secondly, was the Treasury at one in those changes, and were you at one with the Prime Minister in those changes? Big question. Yeah. I know we can't go into the real history of it. Let me go to the last part first.
Bob and I were at one in all of those changes. Bob and I were a great partnership, in these things. Bob's instincts were good instincts for doing this stuff. We fell out in the end because he stopped doing the hard stuff and he didn't want to do it anymore. In which case he was no more use to me to get the things done. See?
What year was that?
99. That was about 80. After the May statement of May 88.
The tariff statement.
After that, and extending dividend imputation, changing the tax treatment of super, all of that, there was no real impetus anymore for change, and we went through this lull, 89 and 90. We got through the election in 90, and then there was a big blue in the cabinet about something Bob wanted to do in the Northern Territory. I forget the name of the place now. Anyway, it was all off the main beam. So the kind of reform period sort of closed off, you could say, about 89. And so, of course, when that happened, we slid through in 1990 with 39% of the vote. People forget this, I mean, Bob's highest election result was 83. 84 was down, 87, 90. You didn't have to be a political scientist to know we were curtains the next time. And he didn't want to do any more changes. So that was it. But before that, he was great. And but the Treasury... Was
the Treasury divided on...
Yeah, well, the Treasury under John Stone, the Treasury was a product of its own self, in a way. It believed in markets, but particularly the markets it ran. You see, when I became Treasurer, the exchange rate was on the cabinet table. Interest rates were on the cabinet table. Wages through the Arbitration Commission and the Commonwealth's role was effectively on the cabinet table. Tariffs were on the cabinet table. And the Treasury kind of liked having them on the cabinet table. And so the new construct of the Australian economy was more or less radically conceived. It was not conceived by the departments. That's not to say they didn't help it, or there were not people in there who agreed with us. That's true. I think you would find almost everyone in the Treasury wanted to be rid of tariffs and quotas. But not the float of the exchange rate.
John Stone opposed that.
He opposed the float, and so did Des Moore. You see Des writing in the Melbourne papers now, a great market person. Well, he was like John. They wanted to hang on to the exchange rate. They wanted to, and when I wanted to let the banks off, take deposit maturity and lending controls off them, they didn't like that either. So the market instincts of the changes came from the cabinet. They didn't come from the Treasury.
And resistance in cabinet, or was it?
Well, it was for a lot of people until we got the model up and going. I mean, there were still a lot of people who believed in big budget deficits provide more growth. You just put people on the government payroll and you decide how big the economy will grow by how much the government spends. This was very much ingrained. And
just the final part of that, and then I want to move on to the non-economic parts of your Prime Ministership. But the question I've always wondered about, which I adverted to before, is were you aware early on of how dramatic a shift was going to happen, with you and Bob Hawke in the economy? Or did it was it one crisis after another driving it on?
Yeah, not really. I said to Bob, look, the Whitlam government got 3 years effectively. I said we might be lucky to get 6, We're better to go for broke. Do the changes, You see, look, one of the things I hate political people saying in Australia, They have great regard for they love the Australian people and they have great regard for them. But not so much regard as to tell them the truth. You know? Not so much regard as to take them into the conversation. And not so much regard to make good public policy decisions in their best interests, you know. And if you do the cut through, you do the stuff and you cut through, well, you're somebody who doesn't understand the Australian people. You know, they dig out some poll to tell you that you don't get them. You know, you're sort of. So I always thought, look, even if we last the 3 years, we'll get the exchange rate off the table, we'll get interest rates off the table. With a bit of luck, we'll get tariffs off the table.